Not bad, man. How are you doing?
Not too bad.
Awesome. Let me get you over here in this little box, and then see if we can get your webcam going, and then we'll do it. Yeah. So, our guest tonight is Josh Howard, aka JHow. You may know him from, casting all the heroes that matters. He was at BlizzCon. He does all the major events, and known for his replay analysis and his John Madden-esque TV pen that he circles stuff with. So, Oh, I dropped the call. But on the bright side, my co-host showed up. So there's always that. So let's call him. Let's call him first. Sorry, production values. Hello.
Hello.
Hey, what's up?
How much are you?
Pretty good. We are live, and you are good looking. Still,
Thank you.
I always forget how good looking Ryan is, and then I remember when I see him, I'm like, oh yeah, that guy looks good. So I'm having a little trouble connecting to JHow right now, but I'm gonna try and get him in here.
Excellent, excellent.
How you doing, man? What'd you do today?
I'm good.
Worked?
I did work, and then we attended a holiday concert.
A holiday concert? Was it Michael Bolton?
No, it was the orchestra and chorus.
Sarah Brightman?
No.
Josh
no.
Groban?
No. It was not one of your fancy new age thing.
My favorite artists. I can't. I can't.
Not that.
I can't connect to
Not
Jay.
that at all.
Well, I'm sure you had fun, anyways.
We did. We
Yeah.
did. It was nice. What did you do today? Did you work?
Yes, it was awful. I mean, I loved it.
Sorry to hear that.
Love my job.
That's a good way to start.
There he is.
Yeah.
There he is. There he is. All right. Let me see.
I have an issue with drivers and my computer to where sometimes whenever I start like OBS or Skype, like it gives me blue screen of death.
Oh, that sucks.
Ooh.
It's pretty unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. There he is, looking handsome as ever. So.
Showered for this and everything.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow. Honored. Truly. All right. So yeah, like I was saying, JHow's known for casting all the awesome events. His replay analysis is John Madden pen. How are you tonight, man?
Not too bad. I had a good day of heroes today, and now it's time to talk heroes.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
good stuff.
Excellent.
That's a good life. So you recently left your day job, right, to pursue this full time, right?
Oh man, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, I think that's awesome. So you got one vote here. So yeah, Nexus Drafthouse, as I said, is all about drafting. This is our 17th episode. We have had a ton of awesome guests, and drafting, I think, is finally becoming more and more talked about. There was a period of time where people just kind of drafted whatever in Hero League and didn't really think about the meta of drafting or things like that, and it's an absolutely crucial part of the game, both for your own games and on the pro scene. So we're all about just helping people reach a better understanding of that. So yeah, what else do I have to say? Do I have anything to announce? No. Yeah, so we picked a couple games from the recent, actually last night, technically this morning, the GCWC tournament in China, in Beijing, in that big awesome blue building. And it was the knockout rounds, so we picked a couple games from that to check up on the most recent Korean Chinese meta and all that. So that is what we're going to do. Yeah, and the first game we have, do you have the drafts, JHow?
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
I just pulled them back up.
All right, cool. So the first game we have is on Garden of Terror, and this was game one between MVP Black and MVP Miracle. So I thought this would be an interesting draft to go over just because obviously these teams know each other very, very well. They know each other's tricks. One is considered better than the other, obviously, but not a huge amount. So I thought it'd be interesting to see how two very familiar teams draft against each other in a pro setting.
This is probably one of the more interesting ones because not only did I, because obviously it was on at a very weird time, I think, for those of us, but I went back and I watched the game because a lot of times when we are analyzing the drafts, a lot of times you got to watch how they played it, and when they use it again, you kind of familiarize yourself with this is their general strategy, this is their general thought process. Ballistics who I think we're covering second, is probably one of the most predictable in terms of what they want to do, and maybe a little less predictable in terms of their draft. But a lot of teams have very similar tendencies from game to game. So it's always interesting to see how they play it and what their thought process is. So
yeah, for
absolutely,
sure.
that's what this show's all about. So
Yeah.
perfect.
Totally. Yeah, so Garden of Terror, on the pro level, what kind of things are you looking for on this map? What kind of things do you think teams tend to trend towards on Garden of Terror, and what are the, I guess, goals on this map for these teams?
Well, obviously, if you've got a good Vikings player, it's all about having Vikings. There's a very weird dynamic to Vikings in the way that you have to play against it, and it's something that I generally cover a lot during the big things. Vikings is pretty much number one, which I believe was first ban, or it was during the first ban phase. Illidan is kind of like a Korean thing, like nobody wants to play against Illidan.
Right.
But I actually wrote down something. This is something that, when you look at most drafts, the biggest thing that you're always going to find is there's generally three things that you look for in a hero, or they need to be able to specialize in one or two things. Crowd control, mobility, and wave clear. And you can prioritize probably wave clear at the top of that. So when you look at a lot of the drafts, you're going to find heroes that have probably at least two of those in all aspects. And, we see this draft in particular, or when we do get to it, you're going to find that most heroes, 9 out of 10 heroes, fit mobility. A lot of them are going to fit crowd control, and you got to have at least a couple things of crowd control. So Garden of Terror is one that heavily prioritizes not crowd control, but wave clear. So Garden of Terror prioritizes a lot of wave clear. So you want to be able to control the lanes, and the reason being is that there's so many camps on the map, and if you get caught out in a drawn out fight, you get more value out of the camps if you've been able to clear the lanes, push the lanes, and be able to control the lanes from the beginning of the game all the way to the later part of the game.
Right. So the meta's kind of changed over the life of heroes in that it's becoming a bit more scientific or detailed in what's being prioritized, whereas it was tank damage, etc., and whatnot. Now it seems to be teams are breaking that down even further into more detailed requirements for the heroes they draft. Which brings me to a question I had actually. So in your time casting this, how has drafting changed? Not so much the meta, because obviously the meta changes all the time, but do you find teams are drafting in a different style more often than before, as far as like trying to counter or block a certain pool of heroes, versus before they would just try to build a blow-up comp, things like that?
To build on that is a different region by region.
Right.
It's definitely different region by region quite a bit. And one common theme that you're always going to see is that people are always going to try and prioritize like one particular player.
Yeah.
And they see that they might have a weaker draft or weaker hero pool. And a lot of times it can be a little misleading. It could just be because they're that good on that hero, or because it fits a lot of the compositions that they're running. And one of those in particular is Kyocha, who oftentimes plays like the same three heroes, and it's basically, well, as I pull this up here, wait a minute, that's not right. Hold on, let me click on the actual person. It's Tassadar Sylvanas Falstad, and
right.
They've strayed a little bit away from Sylvanas. It's kind of like one of his lower win rates, but he plays so much Tassadar Abethar Falstad, and now Tracer, which is one of the things that he plays. And a lot of people will try and target that. And it's not that he can't play other ones, but if you have a hero pool that's at least 4 heroes deep, and it's flexible in the sense that it fits your team dynamic, then you're still going to win out. So it's kind of hard. There's certain people you can target, not to fire any shots, but obviously in North America, Glaurung has been targeted a lot.
Right.
And it's been discussed a lot, is when you take him off certain heroes. And that part comes up, and I think that's a common theme across most regions. The biggest thing is understanding not only what teams like to play, but what they like to play on certain maps, and then the priority in which they draft them. And that's one of the biggest things, the biggest key indicators that we have when we're analyzing drafts, and we literally go over every single draft that we have available, is that we look in the terms of priority in which they pick stuff. And we see early Tassadar picks, something's coming like an Illidan, a Tracer, something along those lines. So
Right.
there's always tendencies, I think, that more and more teams are starting to pick up on. And there's a lot more tools and resources that are out there that are keeping drafts. And before, there wasn't. So people utilizing these tools are actually finding ways to draft against the enemy team. One team in particular, Naventic in North America, when they would play against Cloud9 or Dumpster Tier or something like that, they knew that there was going to be some form of cheese. So they didn't care if you drafted meta heroes. They thought that their 5v5 meta was better than your 5v5 meta without the cheese. And they got to a point to where they would just ban out the weird heroes, and they're like, look, we're gonna play you on even playing field. Let's just go at it. And so there's different things that you can look for from different teams. Dumpster Tier just likes to make things as weird as they possibly can. And there's different teams that have, I mean, they want to make you uncomfortable. So there's always different tendencies, I think, and there's a lot of teams like that. But it's definitely becoming more refined to be able to look for other teams' tendencies and to be able to counter early in the draft and things like that.
Right. So so that's kind of definitely a big way it's changed, is people have become more prominent. Being able to target ban certain players is definitely a thing now, and it's something not specifically players that you can take to your Hero League games, but learning those tells, like you mentioned, Tassadar leads to Tracer or Illidan, things like learning those tells and those little hints of what's coming can help you a ton in the draft. So let's get into this, actually. So the first ban is from MVP Black, and they do ban the old Lost Vikings. Like you said, makes a lot of sense. Obviously, they're just a very powerful soak hero on this map. Do you have any other thoughts on this ban?
No, I think this is just one of the things to where it's a strong pick, and if it's played properly, it's a really strong pick. And at the competitive scene, a lot of people don't want to deal with it on maps like Garden of Terror and Towers of Doom just because of rotations. And the number one thing that if you're playing against a Vikings team ever, and you can actually go check plenty of games that are like this, is that you have to be able to prioritize. You have to probably have at least one global, but you have to have some sort of kill threat. Taking away one Viking from a lane is extremely valuable, and it forces resources from the other team to either shift it down or they lose soak, which is why the Vikings are there a lot of times. Not just that reason, but Vikings, just take it off the map and don't worry about any of the weird stuff.
So what kind of heroes target out Vikings really well?
I mean, Tracer's actually one. Things like Kerrigan, Zeratul, stuff like that. Things that can really blow up a hero. I mean, you think about Li Ming, and you're not probably going to land a combo on a Viking in a lane, especially early game. And it's mostly like pre-10 a lot of this comes in, because as you get later in the game, obviously team fights and stuff like that are going to be far different. But early game, like just heroes that have like high burst damage and can stay on a Viking, which is what makes things like Zeratul and Kerrigan so powerful. Falstad, to be able to rotate in if it's a 1v1, you can rotate Falstad in and then be able to send him elsewhere, or he's able to fly in. So heroes like that are actually pretty heavily prioritized against Viking comps.
Right. And then so you want the quick burst damage that you can actually rely on. So the ban that comes out from MVP Miracles, Illidan, obviously it's like, hi, I know your name is MVP Rich, let's just not even mess around, which makes sense to me for sure. So there's that. And then the draft gets interesting here, I think, with the first pick, Tassadar from MVP Black.
Yeah, at this point you already know what's up. MVP Black has this thing, and a lot of teams will not run Tracer without Tassadar. Right. And it became a thing to where a lot of teams felt comfortable with it at first, and then they went away from it, and then they're like, no, this is still good. Tassadar is really good wave clear. Obviously, his pre-shielding helps, and she's able to heal up off of the auto attacks. So there's a lot that comes to the table, and a first pick Tassadar is very telling.
Yes.
In a lot of ways. And so that right there, you already know something's up, and if it doesn't fit into your wheelhouse, and it's really funny, it's actually come up a couple of times, is when somebody first picks Tassadar, and then you kind of take their strategy away or their heroes away, you see that Tassadar is all of a sudden like, well, wait a minute, is our value as high in Tassadar, and can we execute it as well? But the minute you see Tassadar, you already know something's coming.
Yeah, for sure. Now, this is something, actually, can you tell us why Tassadar and Tracer is such a powerful combo for people who are maybe thinking of practicing this?
Yeah, so at level 4 you get Leeching Plasma, which basically you heal off of your auto attacks. So you throw that in there, and so not only does she have a little bit of sustain when she goes in, but Kala's Embrace at level 7. Part of that shield lasts after it expires. So she has a really low health pool, and if she gets turned on in the slightest, you kind of find Tracer in a very weird spot. Is that if she goes in and she takes a lot of damage, it's the same way the old Zeratul used to work. Is that it was a really high cooldown, especially if you use your recall, which is a very long cooldown. But it's a way for you to dive the back line, take some of that damage, and then also have kind of like a buffer so that you don't actually lose your health pool, so that if you come back out, you're able to go back in a little bit safer, and without sacrificing that health pool, and that way you don't have to commit healing resources back over to Tracer, because a lot of times she's in and out. She's not going to stay on that back line for very long unless you get an early kill.
Right. Gotcha.
It's interesting if we've seen the prevalence of Tassadar come back in comps other than that include Tracer, and especially at a first pick. What are your thoughts there?
Very rarely. You'll see teams sometimes heavily prioritize Tassadar on Infernal Shrines. He has really good wave clear. His basic abilities alone add tremendous value, basically to help clear the shrine and to be able to sustain on the shrine. Outside of that, probably not.
Right. So this is something actually that I think in Hero League people, I mean, if you can draft it, especially later, if you have a duo queue buddy, this would be a good thing to practice.
Illidan?
Or Tassadar Tracer or Tassadar Illidan, because I think this is something you can definitely get by in Hero League quite a bit. That's pretty powerful. So just a suggestion. Practice that with your buddies. So next 2 picks come from MVP Miracle, their first 2 picks, and it's Tyrael Zeratul. Now, Tyrael is a staple of this region for a lot of reasons, and Zeratul was picked very early in this draft. So, what do you think of those 2 picks there?
It's a really interesting first 2 picks, and the hardest part to take away from this is what are you planning and where does it come in? And obviously you already know that you're probably dealing with something that's going to be diving your backline. That's the reason when we talked about Illidan. Illidan's a little bit easier to counter at times because he's instantly on that backside. Brightwing obviously fits really well to counter that. But Tyrael Zeratul is very strange.
Right.
And this is times where you look at the draft and you're like, okay, like this is interesting. Zeratul, if you're afraid of Tassadar Zeratul, which is kind of weird.
Sure.
We've kind of seen like the anti-sanctification with a Void Prison, because sanctification will expire while Void Prison is on it. And so we see that from time to time. The Korean region kind of actually made that popular a few months back. But when you're this early in the draft, it's almost too hard to take away from that. Tyrael, we know that he is a Korean special. They play it extremely well. Zeratul, he can basically go out and hunt and be able to kill stuff. And the rework Zeratul actually allows you to stay in the game. And one of the biggest things that you have to think about is with Tracer is that Vorpal Blade's now at level 1, and some of the counters that you see towards Tracer, if you're preparing for Tracer, if you're playing against the Zeratul, understand that Vorpal Blade can be one of your arch enemies, in the sense that he gets that auto attack on you, you can recall, and then he just hits that 1 key, and he's instantly right on top of you, and it makes it really difficult if you blinked in and then recalled out and blinked out. So a lot of times you use your blinks, you use your recall, and then Vorpal Blade can be on there. I actually see that quite a bit, and we saw it a lot more this summer in the North American region. I think Michael Udall played an extremely fantastic Zeratul against the Tracer comp on Battlefield of Eternity. So that's one dynamic of an endless possibility with Zeratul.
And I hadn't.
So is that? Okay.
No, go ahead, Ryan.
I was just to say, is this what's driving the pick so early? I mean, is it really in anticipation of the Tracer, or is there other reasons to pick him up?
I'd say there's probably more reasons. What those reasons are with this draft, I've never seen a Tyrael Zeratul first 2 picks before.
Right.
Yeah, me neither. It was puzzling to me too. Yeah.
Already, this draft is fascinating.
Yeah, it's very different.
So, yeah.
Very different, and I had not considered Vorpal Blade against Tracer at all, but that is definitely makes
it's
me
pretty
think.
mean. I actually did it against somebody earlier in quick match.
Nice.
It's really funny. Like, oh, you think you're safe? Well, let me go ahead and press 1,
No one
and
is
there
safe.
we go.
Yeah.
So are you announcing your intention to go pro, or?
Yeah.
Actually,
Pro Zera, Glauro. Yeah. All right. Cool. So, the second and third picks from MVP Black here is interesting to me as well. There's the Tracer, obviously, but it's with a Brightwing. They pick Brightwing and then Tracer, so they've already got their double support going. They've got the whole Tracer engine kind of revved up there and ready to see what they can do with it. So what do you think of the Brightwing pick here at this point?
So you got to look at this in two different ways. One, you get a global when you look at Brightwing, but furthermore, because you're running double support with Tassadar, Tracer is not going to be in the middle of a team fight and rarely gets hit by a lot of AoE damage. Because of the way that she moves, because of the way that she dives, it's not generally in the same sense as your frontline melee or your backline's getting hit by something. It's normally from a different angle, and so it creates different opportunities. So you have Tassadar that's pre-shielding Tracer, and then she goes about her business. And so a lot of times teams struggle with, and not necessarily MVP Miracle, but you'll find that teams struggle with the fact that you have somebody on your backline, which is why Illidan comes in. But Illidan obviously is a completely different beast, but you have Tracer flanking in, able to get on that backline and harass, and it pulls your attention. It pulls a lot away from what you're accomplishing on the front line. And then all of a sudden you have Brightwing, and you have a warrior, possibly double warrior, depending on how you go. And you really only have to prioritize staying in certain positions. So rarely will you ever see teams go hard in on a Tracer comp. And sometimes it might be the right thing. But if you're going hard in on a Tassadar Brightwing, it's very difficult, especially if they opt to go Emerald Wind. So diving in there, like Brightwing stays a little bit safer. You have the disengage if you go Emerald Wind. You have the blink heal. You have less priority targets, depending on your team comp. And so it adds there's a lot of good value to that. And you don't necessarily have to commit that. You've got the polymorph again, which fits into, she's got wave clear, she's got a global, she's got CC. And that's a lot of the things that I talk about in terms of the three key things that you look for most heroes.
Right.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how we already mentioned how Tassadar kind of telegraphs the Tracer pick, and then MVP Miracle got to pick up their first two heroes? Why wouldn't you just steal the Tracer away?
That's kind of something that I alluded to earlier, is that if they have the Tassadar and you pick up the Tracer, you're now obligated to babysit that Tracer for the entire game. Right. And the number one supporter of that is Tassadar. And so it's really difficult to try and prioritize that. You look at Ariel, you're not committing AoE heals to a single target who's going to be diving that backline with no pre-shielding. You're not going to commit Rhaegar chain heals off to where they might not connect in the priority targets because you have stronger heals on the first target hit. Stuff like that.
She's a package deal.
Right, so does it really come down to... Yeah, so it really comes down to that a solo Tassadar is better than a solo Tracer at this level of play, because it doesn't totally screw over MVP Black's draft.
North American teams will say that you don't need Tassadar, and that's fine. Yeah, and it does work. So it's an interesting dynamic.
Well, it's an interesting question from chat here too. What if you went with a Zarya shield instead of a Tassadar shield? Could you just explain why that wouldn't work?
Well, the leeching plasma.
First you get leeching plasma. Second, the shield persist, and shield ally is on a 12-second cooldown, where Tassadar shields are on a 5-second cooldown. So you have far more value out of that. It's not terrible, but you now all of a sudden have nowhere near the protection and control. Zarya doesn't have great wave clear. She doesn't survive the same way. Tassadar basically needs no support. If you're dying on a Tassadar, then something went terribly wrong with your team.
At that point, Zarya is not empowering Tracer. Tracer's empowering Zarya at that point, right? Getting energy for her and stuff. So that's not really the goal.
Tracer still,
right? Yeah. I mean, it's not. Yeah, it's like you said. It's probably not horrible, but it's not like Tass shields. Yeah. Okay. Right. I got you. What happened next? What happened next was MVP Miracle banned Muradin, which totally makes sense considering we see so many games where there's this race for the tank pool kind of draft. But obviously they didn't go with that this draft, so there's a lot of priority tanks just kind of hanging out there. MVP Black decided to go for this quick Tracer build instead. So yeah, Muradin ban. Would you have banned maybe ETC over Muradin here, or do you like the Muradin ban?
I like the Muradin ban. Like ETC, basically you're committing a certain playstyle to ETC, like the power slide, you basically, if you're playing ATC and you're power sliding, you need to have a priority target. And if you ever watch MVP Black, and they actually fell off a little bit at BlizzCon, but their compositions, and if you're ever at a live event and you have audio or you can hear teams, there's certain teams that will yell, like Tracer, and they're just everybody just instantly collapse, right? The minute they spot one person who used an ability wrong or a target went out, and you will see an instant collapse onto these heroes. And so ETC is a power slide, it needs follow-up. And then if you don't get the kill, you've now found yourself in a rather weird position as ETC, where Muradin, you can still make plays with a Stormbolt. It's a little bit harder with a skill shot, but you have far more survivability, and you just bring a lot to the table at that point. So not only that, but Muradin is just, he's great. And I'm looking here at the stats. Sign, in 140 games, he's played Muradin 56 times and has a 77% win rate. That's not bad.
I mean,
that's pretty good.
pretty solid, I guess. Yeah. I mean, pretty good. All right, so yeah, makes sense then. Muradin I think Muradin's the better of the two in general too. I mean, obviously ETC has a lot of strengths, but yeah. So MVP Black here does what they did at BlizzCon, and they banned Malf. They don't like Malf. They don't want to play him. They don't want to play against him. They don't like Malf. So obviously they also have two supports already, so that makes sense. But yeah, any thoughts on Malf in the current meta, especially for these Korean teams?
No, I mean, everybody knows Malfurion's strong, and if you look at VP Roots follow up, if you can get Tracer there, you get Roots on her, and then you get some sort of hard CC. It's a big cooldown, but sometimes late games a big cooldown for one kill is far more than worth it, and I think that's one of the things that goes most underrated. So
for sure,
a lot of potential there, but Malfurion
especially
really
against
strong.
comps that really prioritize Tracer, right, or built around Tracer. Take her out.
Oh
yeah.
So yeah, totally sensical ban there. So yeah, coming next from MVP Miracle is Falstad Karazim. Now this, obviously, the support pool is pretty limited at this point. A lot of the meta supports are taken, so you're looking at Karazim, Uther, heroes like that. So what does the Karazim bring here with his rework with the Earth Ally and etc. here? Is that what this is about?
Well, the thing with Karazim, if you look at the heals in particular, and I'm trying to remember what they ran at the level 10, whether it was 7-sided or Palm, if you look at Tracer comps, her goal is to single out a person and kill them. And you don't kill somebody without putting a pulse bomb on them, which has a cooldown. Right. So does Divine Palm, and if you trigger that, so it makes an easy Palm target. And then his AoE heals are still really good. And then if you think about the fact that MVP Black is going to pick up presumably another assassin to be able to do damage elsewhere, and then a warrior, area heals, you're not necessarily having to prioritize like direct heals towards one person to keep them alive, because Tracer will likely be prioritizing a backline hero, while the rest of the team will be prioritizing disrupting the front to middle part of that, depending on the areas and stuff like that. A lot of weird variables going on there, but we haven't seen a lot of Karazim since the rework. That's just been the general principle of going up against heroes like that, and to be able to disrupt. His AoE heals for the longest time were actually the best in the game, but obviously you got to put yourself in a position to be able to capitalize on that. But Divine Palm is normally one of the number one things when you're looking at going up against the Tracer.
Okay, gotcha.
It still does. It doesn't necessarily take him higher than most other supports, because you can Crystal Aegis, you can do stuff like that. But that is one of the reasons, out of fewer than probably other supports.
And he has Cleanse, which is nice against Brightwing for sure. Always a plus over Ariel there.
Well, the Cleanse is now at 16, and you got to.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, it's different now.
That's right. I forgot. Yeah.
That's why I'm saying, like, I haven't seen a lot of Karazim yet, and I want to see how people are playing him more with the rework.
And as far as the Falstad goes, obviously you have the global here. What else? What else made them go for the Falstad over some other ranged assassins?
Well, you fall into the same thing as before. You have wave clear, you have mobility, and you have a slow. It's not really going to do a whole lot. But the other thing is and I believe they went this. I highly doubt they went hammer gains, but you have static shield. And so if Tracer gets on you in the back line, and this is something, if you're trying to differentiate, do you pick hammer gains? Do you pick the extra barrel roll range, or do you pick static shield? A lot of times when you're playing against somebody like Chen, Illidan, Tracer, they are going to be on your backline to harass you.
Right.
It's really difficult to move, stutter step, auto attack, move, auto attack, move, auto attack. So the greater value that you're going to get is because, let's assume you're playing as a team, your team will eventually help you, and Static Shield, by using your lightning, will actually give you more value when you have a harassing person on your back line.
Right.
And so you have the potential of Mighty Gust for a disengage. You can isolate a lot of people. There's just a lot of value that Falstad brings to it, but he's a safe pick. He has the global potential. And like I said, on a map like this, you need to be able to, 1, match globals, 2, have a disengage. But he fits a lot of things that MVP Miracle can do with their composition.
So that shield, Static Shield, along with the global, is probably what edges him out here over someone like Vala.
Yeah, Vala against Tracer.
Right.
You can get some kills, but you're probably going to lose that fight.
Okay, gotcha.
Especially if they have a Tassadar.
Right, that totally makes sense. So MVP Black rounds out their composition with Li Ming and ETC. Li Ming is their second assassin of choice here. I wasn't sure they were going to go. I thought they might go a melee, a melee assassin, but they went with the Li Ming here. And ETC obviously is there and available, so you should get him.
Yeah, he's one of the last tanks left, right?
Well, I mean,
that's really viable.
Head and shoulders, above others. Yeah. Okay. What do you think of the Li Ming choice here?
The Li Ming choice I would have liked to have seen on the side of MVP Miracle, especially knowing that they needed some type of big damage. And I think Li Ming actually survives just well against Tracer. Plus, you can use Calamity against her to really do some burst damage. Obviously, it's really difficult to land skill shots, but you can go Force Armor at 1, and to be able to sustain against a lot, especially if she uses her melee on you, mitigates a lot of that damage. It's not always the right choice, but it's better than what they ended up with because I know the draft.
Yeah.
But Li Ming, obviously, if you're playing an Illidan comp, if you're playing a Tracer comp, something that is designed to harass the backside, you have to have good burst damage. And it goes back to the early part that I was talking about in a team fight, is 1 is meant to, you can kill somebody on the back line with Tracer. But if you have Tracer on the back line and you have big damage on the front line, you have to figure out where you're going to commit your resources. And it's very difficult to get to the back line to deal with Li Ming.
Okay.
And so if you go in, Tracer's still going to be on your backside. If you turn to deal with a Tracer, you're still going to be getting hit by huge damage from Li Ming. So it really disrupts a lot. That's why I like the Li Ming pick more than I do the Vala pick. And there's a lot of other reasons that you can go into. But in terms of straight team fighting, that's where there's a huge value.
Right. I can see that for sure.
Yeah, something I really liked about Li Ming is the varying just distance at which she can deal her damage, right? With like a Calamity, especially, leap in versus all of her ranged abilities, which have pretty significant range, even compared to like Vala.
So you would have.
So you got to pick your poison, and you don't really have anything to deal with it at this point because you already picked up Tyrael, and Zeratul and Falstad. That now all of a sudden you're thinking, well, how do we deal with Li Ming on one side while Tracer's on the other? And it's very difficult.
Well, yeah, and as you mentioned, right, that in order for Terrazine to do healing, that they would need at varying distances in team fights. He sometimes has to put himself in jeopardy, right?
The risk versus reward is much more difficult at that point.
Would you have taken Li Ming on MVP Miracle over Falstad if it came to that? If it was like
in this part of the rotation, yes.
Yeah.
It's not a bad choice to Falstad here, and it's not a bad choice their last one, but they made it extremely difficult to get where they needed to go.
Right, and they do end up finishing out their comp with Jaina. And I sort of think Jaina is underrated as far as her survivability in a lot of ways. I don't know if they skilled Frost Armor this game and stuff, but she's actually pretty solid against heroes like Samuro, surprisingly so. Like, she doesn't have a blink or anything, but I think maybe that's what they were
auto attack one at 4?
Yeah,
right?
I think that's called Frost Armor. I'm not sure. Forgot what it's called, but yeah, that spell, that talent is actually really good against heroes like Tracer. Any CC you can get on Tracer is nice. So I kind of get where they're going with this.
Well, the hard part against it is that it only reduces damage from one auto attack.
Right. Yeah.
That's actually the hard thing, is that they are chilled, so they're slowed. But Tracer is like one of the few people that can deal with that. So Samuro obviously runs into issues and things like that.
I'm just trying to kind of maybe play devil's advocate here. Like, why did they go with the Jaina? And I think maybe that's why. What do you think of the Jaina pick?
Well, when I watched the game, the casters kind of had the same perplexed thought that I did, is that you see Zeratul and you see Jaina and you think VP Ring of Frost.
Right.
Sometimes it can be a little difficult to pull off, but it's obviously one thing that's been tried and true for a very long time. They ended up going Water Elemental.
Interesting.
You don't really see the value in it because Li Ming's not worried about it. Brightwing's not worried about it. Tassadar's not worried about it.
Yeah.
ETC might be the only person who's worried about it because Tracer can blink away or recall away from it. And it was just really awkward that they didn't attempt that playstyle. Whether it was a misclick or not, the world may never know.
Yeah, I mean...
But it's a really awkward thing to deal with.
So I assume the Water Elemental disengages from Tracer as soon as she blinks, right? Like, loses its target and you have to retarget it?
Probably so.
Probably.
I mean, it is difficult. I mean, who are you going to land it against? ETC?
Right.
Like Ring of Frost. So you have like one hero to land it against, and you have Tassadar shields. That's why I said like them picking up Li Ming in the Falstad spot would have been better for team fighting, especially to be able to put pressure on it. And you can go Calamity, which really can diminish Tracer's health pool. Then if you have that one auto attacker, that way you get that consistent damage to remove some of that shield, remove some of her health pool because it's not very high. Then you kind of have a two-pronged approach without as much of a threat from Tracer on your backline.
Right. So, go ahead.
I was just saying, when I looked at these drafts in total, right? I mean, MVP Black pretty much looks like they got their wish list. They picked up the Tracer, Tassadar comp. They have a lot of CC, a ton of mobility. And I look at MVP Miracle, and it doesn't look like that they have many tools to deal with it effectively. Even if they had kind of picked up the Ring of Frost with the mobile comp and MVP Black. When you look at these in total, is there what is MVP Miracle's hope now, other than to outplay them? What do you see when you look at this?
I mean, it's rotations with Falstad. It's kill potential with Zeratul. And then Jaina obviously can add a lot to a team fight if her shots land. Blizzard is on such a big cooldown, and you don't have a whole lot of targets to hit with it. Brightwing is going to be tough to hit. Li Ming is going to be tough to hit. Tassadar, good luck. And then it just leaves ETC. And so it's really kind of like an all-in comp with your mage on the backside. I think this game actually went on for like 25 or 28 minutes, so it was a little bit surprising.
Game.
Yeah, I think MVP like made some mistakes, and again with Tracer, it's high risk, high reward. And so sometimes it's just a matter of picks, and then it's the nature of Garden of Terror is that sometimes the games can be painfully long.
Yeah.
Your win condition is the Garden Terror, and if you play the seed game correctly, and it's almost impossible to like explain this in Hero League or Quick Match or anything, is that if it's a late game and you both have a Garden Tier and your keep is low, don't just charge in with your Garden Tier. Defend with it. The biggest tool to defend against the Garden Tier is another Garden Tier.
Yep.
You have the Polymorph that's available on a very short cooldown. It prevents a lot of follow-up. Plus, you can mitigate a lot of the damage and not give up much. And then oftentimes you can kind of turn that around against the enemy team if you play it right. So you saw a lot of the other thing is you'll see in competitive on Garden of Terror in particular, especially the Koreans do this a lot. The North American scene, I don't know why they haven't picked up on this. I think Ballistics might have been one of the first teams that used it, probably the most flawless, is that not only did they get their Garden Tier, but they used it and you'll see them defend other seeds. And so it's not a matter of getting value out of it. Your value is not structural right away. Your value is that you go and you might get a wall and then you retreat, and while the rest of your team is going, and you defend your spot on the Garden Tier that you're getting the seeds from, the Shambler or whatever it is. And so you get more seeds. And so now all of a sudden, instead of getting like that true value out of the first Garden Tier, you're now rotating it. So the next time around, like I said, the number one thing to defend a Garden Tier is another Garden Tier. And if the other team opts to just drop back, you're getting zero value and you're just like, well, this is going to be a 30-minute game.
Right, yeah.
But if all of a sudden you rotate that in, so you steal seeds, or you use it to, we got one, so we're going to take it down to the other, we'll give up a fort. We'll give up a fort wall. All of a sudden now the next seed phase, it's later in the game, the Garden Tier is more valuable, you now are going to be able to get a Garden Tear, and they're not, because of the rotation that you made on that before. So if you actually watch some of the games, you'll see teams, Korean teams especially, they will prioritize defending and getting more value out of the second or third one, as opposed to the way that we normally see, where both teams grab it, they meet in the middle, they smack each other, nobody gets any value. So
using your Garden Tear,
you'll see that.
Using your Garden Tear as a map control element rather than a siege element.
Sure. You use it so you both get one, you defend with yours, and then you go and get the next one.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just gotta watch out for that guy in quick match being like, but see how much siege damage I've done? I'm doing it right.
Yes, you also died while suiciding for that wall.
That's right.
Oh, they're out there for sure.
Well, not even achieving anything significant.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, so that was an interesting draft for sure. I was very intrigued by it, and I actually thought the game was good too. It had a lot of kind of exciting moments. So if you guys haven't checked out the VODs from Gold Cup, be sure to check them out. And this game was a good one. So we can move into the next game, which was on Sky Temple, and it was between the teams Ballistics, your BlizzCon champions, obviously pretty good at Heroes of the Storm, some would say, and who was the other team? Oh, Zero. They were Panda Zero, right, at BlizzCon, but at this they're just Zero, apparently. That's what
it was Zero Panda.
Zero Panda, right.
Yeah.
Well, they're just Zero now. they dropped the Panda. They're like, nah, Lily's terrible. So yeah, and it was on Sky. So it was on Sky Temple, and I like Sky Temple drafts. Actually, I think they're interesting. But this was a very, very like meta draft. It was very like, this is the standard. Here it comes, and then it kind of really goes left. Like, it's like, except for this, check this out. Like there's a couple picks here that are like, oh, I see, trying something a little spicy now. So
Danny, you're such a tease.
I am. I'm building it up, but it was a cool draft.
You are.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I mean, yeah, Jeff, can you talk a little bit about the current meta on this map before we get started?
I think the biggest thing to take away is, so the current meta on this, obviously you want to have at least one global on your side. Wave clear, again, is heavily prioritized. And then you got to have people that can sustain in team fights, which is pretty much the standard. So this is why you see a more traditional meta than anything else. Mm-hmm. But Ballistics prioritizes this to where they have to have a global in their playstyle, and they will heavily prioritize Brightwing. It's like one of Soy's favorite heroes. But their style is extremely predictable on Sky Temple.
Right.
And during the second temple phase, we all know that it's the bottom temple on the map. And so the way Ballistics plays this is that they'll rotate early, they'll look to get early structure advantages if they can take a fight on the temples, which they actually had a very difficult time in the early part of this game. And then right before the second temple phase, they will actually prioritize just going down, grabbing the siege camp, and pushing in your lane. And the reason that's so important is because if you get those first few temple shots, it takes away their well. And so if you get rid of the gate and the two towers before that second temple phase, and you can get a few early shots, while the other team is generally prioritizing the top bruiser camp. They're normally slow to rotate down. And so they recognize this, and so they're like, all right, we'll do this, and then we can sustain in these team fights. And if you watch their game, they keep Brightwing in the bottom lane for the first temple phase, because it's guaranteed the top two. And then in between that, they'll rotate Brightwing to the top lane. And so you can punish a lot of this because they'll leave Brightwing on the top, they'll force the rest of the rotation down to the bottom, get the siege camp push in. If they need support, Brightwing fits it, and then you can get a huge lead at that point by winning a fight. And a lot of teams have struggled there. If not, you get that wall and you get out, and Brightwing continues to be able to deal with the push that's going to presumably come. And so Ballistic strategy is extremely predictable. That is exactly how they play that game. And it's beautiful, right? And if you watch their early rotations and the way they handle the first temples, it's actually really well. But they died in the second part. I know it's getting a little bit into the analysis thing.
No, that's right.
But the meta is based around globals to be able to deal with rotations. Mm-hmm. And that's why you see Ballistics draft the way that they do. And then Zero Panda obviously has something up their sleeve, which is a little bit different, but they responded accordingly. If you actually watch games from BlizzCon with Ballistics, a lot of teams don't respond correctly. And if they do, they think that they do, they don't know what the next step is. And Ballistics would have another step, and the other team would just be like, we're responding to whatever Ballistics is doing. And so it's really difficult to deal with that. But you have to have one global to deal right now. And right now you've got Dahaka, Falstad, and Brightwing, and then eventually ETC if so choosing.
Right. So that's a criticism that gets leveled at ballistics pretty often, is that they are predictable. So it sounds like you agree with that assessment. It has merit. That they are vulnerable. That's their vulnerability, in that their drafts are predictable and you can outplay.
Except they'll still do it better than 99%.
Right. And that's the challenge.
Now, Well, the mechanics are pulling them through, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that teams are starting to figure out how they draft and how they play.
Gotcha. Okay, so first ban on this one did go to ballistics, so they ban out Falstad. So there's that global there that you were talking about. One of them, one of the few very coveted globals in the game. So yeah, and the first ban that comes out from Panda, I'm sorry, they're not called that anymore, Zero, is actually Vala, and I'm pretty sure that was a target ban. What do you think of the Vala first ban?
It was definitely a target ban. I think it was Nacho Gen, or SCSC, excuse me. SCSC, especially at BlizzCon, was terrorizing people with Vala.
Yes.
And it's really difficult to deal with, and you just take that off the board so you don't have to deal with the amount of pressure that you'll have from that.
Right. Okay. Cool. And so first pick that does come out from ballistics is ETC. One of those, I mean, you can say as a global. I mean, it comes a little later, but it's there. Probably will be taking it on this map, and they get into this drafting the warrior first thing, but he has the added benefit of the global there. Any other comments about the ETC first pick?
Strong first pick. It's really tough to deal with, so I like it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so this is where I find this part a little interesting. Malfurion is like, yeah, okay, sure, you're going to first pick Malfurion, I get that. And then they go with the Tychus right out the gate. Now, Tychus is a very popular hero, gaining popularity in other regions, but obviously a favorite assassin for the Chinese and Korean regions. He does a lot. He's a solid assassin on his own right, and he blocks a lot of avenues of drafting. So
it definitely hinders your double tank strategies, which a lot of teams aren't necessarily afraid to go into it if they have the right tools. So I don't mind the Tychus early pick. It's something we actually see a lot of teams from a lot of regions prioritize pretty heavily on Sky Temple. It's the same way that you would think Zeratul would work, in that you now have like an open area to work in. So your Void Prison now, you have better availability to win a team fight with it. The same for your drill. Is that it's a big deal in the sense that you can put the drill down, and now all of a sudden you have a wide open area to place it down, and you're not necessarily limited to a choke. And if you look at certain maps, Cursed Hall works well around areas.
The wall.
Sky Temple, it works around certain areas. And so now instead of just having like, let's just say it's like omnidirectional, right? Like you only have one way to shoot it down a choke. You're going to get limited value out of it. If you work in an open area, your drill now has like a 360-degree area. And so a lot of times you'll see it there. Some teams are still going to pick Odin, and that's fine. But as you said, it limits the double draft or the double tank draft that you could possibly go into. It's a strong pick in general, and it just gives a lot more control in terms of team fights once you hit the heroics.
Yeah. And another thing I think it does with this pick is, in the same vein of stopping the double warrior draft, is it lets them kind of reserve Dahaka for themselves. They're like, you probably might want Dahaka because of his global, but now with our Tychus we can get other stuff and get back to Dahaka later. At least that's kind of what I thought maybe was going on here, but I'm no Zero. But that's just kind
of... Well, if you look at the globals right away, they ban Falstad. They pick up ETC. So there's 2 out of 4 that you have. Dahaka being the other one with Brightwing. And you imagine that most teams are going to pick Malfurion.
Right.
If they do pick Brightwing, you're just fine because you have ETC. So they prioritize globals right away. And that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, for sure. Which they do pick up another one here. They pick up Li Ming, which is not a global, but they also pick up the Brightwing. Great hero on this map. Talked a lot about a little bit ago about what Brightwing does on this map and what Ballistics does with Brightwing on this map. So, yeah. And Li Ming, open spaces, always nice and a great hero.
Angles are everything when you play Li Ming.
Mhm.
Like if you're one of those Li Ming players that will just shoot at the first 3 minions in a wave and you don't take the angle to shoot down, then you're probably doing it wrong.
Yep.
And reasonably, if you're really good with Li Ming and your timing's perfect, your arcane orb can actually affect all 7 minions. So
Yep.
angles are key.
Angles are key, and she has plenty of room to move here to make those angles. So in the hands of a good player, like these players on Ballistics, I don't know who played Li Ming in this game. I forgot actually, but obviously in their hands, she's gonna get those angles. So for sure. And then the
She feels
Brightwing.
just like one of the best all-around assassins in the game right now. I mean, right?
Yeah.
She just so many things she can do. So.
Yeah, very just very few weaknesses. Especially, I think her power comes from her talent tree. She has so many options as far as what adaptability to what she needs that it makes her really powerful, and of course burst damage with resets. So Li Ming, Brightwing, and then we get into the second ban, and this is why I picked this draft actually. They do ban Tassadar here, which looks kind of. I think based on what we saw earlier, because this was the same night. I think they saw the Tracer build like being built in reverse here, and they're like, "Wait a minute."
It's much safer to do it at the end of the draft than the beginning of the draft, and I think that
it got sniffed out. Yeah.
It's either Tassadar Illidan or Tassadar Tracer at this point, and both of them would excel on this map in particular. So just don't deal with it.
And it fits really well into the comp that Ballistics is already built, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's a nice catch by Zero there for sure. I like that ban a lot. And in response, Ballistics does end up actually banning Johanna and not the Muradin. What do you think of that choice?
When you talk about control and fights and stuff like that, I actually don't mind this at all, especially the way that they're playing their composition. And what they have lined up is that Johanna obviously has Iron Skin, and if you opt to go, because you already have one global and you don't want to go stage dive and you want to go mosh pit, you're obviously looking at different tactics at this point. Malfurion is there. You look at locking down a hero. The number one weakness for Malfurion is burst healing. And so all of a sudden you now have priority targets, is that whatever they draft next will be able to pepper away in terms of damage. So you have sustained damage and you have burst damage a lot of times when you look at compositions. So we don't see double mage because it's burst or it's skill shot, stuff like that. So you normally have some type of sustained damage to go parallel, whether it's a melee or a ranged assassin that does auto attacks. And so now all of a sudden you have this ability, and I know this is crazy because if you try and get a stun, a power slide onto Johanna, it's much more difficult because she's got Iron Skin. You can still, it's very difficult, but you can still 100-0 Muradin if need be. He can't get away from a power slide without a cleanse, and at that point you're taking away other resources and you regroup. So it also is a Mosh Interrupter. You could have gone Muradin or Johanna there. Maybe they knew something was coming with this draft. You talk about Roots plus Condemn. There's a lot of flexibility, I think, with both heroes. And so I'm just trying to rationalize the Johanna one. I'm okay with the Johanna for a wide variety of reasons.
Yeah. Now, if they did get Johanna and actually draft Johanna over Muradin, they would have a very passive comp, however. It would be it'd be hard to initiate with a comp like that. Tychus, Malfurion. I mean, you'd have Roots, which is a good start, but I feel like a hero like Muradin can really, really kick off a fight. But again, Johanna obviously would probably still work just fine, and they might have known something about what Zero was planning. So yeah. Okay. What happened after that? Oh yeah, Dahaka. So the Dahaka pick here, the global, again, we talked about globals in a lot of maps, and Thrall. So as it stands, it looks like, and when I was watching this draft, writing down the picks, I was like, are they gonna solo Dahaka? I don't know, man. I don't know about solo Dahaka, but we'll get to that, I guess. And what do you think of Dahaka Thrall here?
Dahaka fits a lot, especially in the current meta. He's the only global hero left, right? Yeah, he's the only global hero left, unless you're playing Abathur. Right. But he's the only global hero left. He's got great wave clear. He's got the crowd control, and he fits a lot of the things that people are looking for. That's why it was after the level 1 talent rework for Dahaka. I'd been advocating for him for a long time, so it's really good to see him in the current meta. We've seen it sparsely used in Europe, I think, during Gamescom. But now he fits in, and he's rarely ever a solo warrior. Right. He's always that off tank.
Off tank, yeah.
Which is kind of what makes it's kind of what makes Thrall a little bit surprising to me.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I thought too when I saw this. I was like, well, Dahaka's your solo guy who goes off and soaks for you. Thrall's another solo laner. Obviously, they could both do it, and you can have 3 in the middle. That's totally fine. But Dahaka, I'm very pro Dahaka. My most Hero League wins is Dahaka. I love that hero. But I was worried about the draft at this point because I am not as good at this game as these guys, and I was like, what are they gonna draft? I don't understand. So yeah, the final 2 picks here. Now I do think they were gonna go into Tassadar Illidan here for sure, or Tassadar Tracer, but probably Illidan. And I was curious to see, well, what's the backup plan? And the backup plan was Tyrael for the off tank, which, you know, they love doing that, and Sergeant Hammer. So what does the Sergeant Hammer bring to Ballistics here that she would get picked here?
So Sergeant Hammer is an easy pick at this point because Thrall, you're going to have to Sunder to get back there, and even then, it's going to be very difficult. You're going to get polyed if you try and dive on that as Thrall, and you're not a 100-0 hero until you hit 16, possibly 20, and even then, you don't have that. Dahaka's not going to murder anybody that quickly. You now have Sanctification to dive anything, and Tychus is going to have to run through an entire army, and his auto attack range, they don't have any burst heroes on the side of Zero anymore. It's all about isolation, literally, you know, when you talk about heroics. You now have to isolate a hero and then try and work at it. And the hardest thing is that with Brightwing, you might be able to, but now you add Tyrael into the mix, and you have great frontline control, you have good protection, and you're not getting to that back line. Like, it's almost going to be impossible unless you flank, but you're not walking through the front line of ETC and Sergeant Hammer, and you don't have the threat to the front line.
With the face smell and the power slide, the polymorph.
There's so much.
Yeah. Now you could.
So now you're looking. Now you're looking at the fact that you're taking burst damage because you're probably not going to run solo Dahaka. So now you have 3 frontline heroes taking splash damage from Li Ming. You don't have to, and now you have max range for Sergeant Hammer. And Sergeant Hammer is always a tricky pick because you have to protect it and you have to make sure you get value out of it. And they managed to do just that at various times.
Well, as you noted, they have a lot of protection for her, right? Considering Zero's comp, there's little that can get in there.
Now you can draft a team that can get to Hammer here. Like, you can draft a team that can get past this, work its way past this, but that team does not exist over on the side of Zero. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Like Malfurion, Tychus, Dahaka, that's a nightmare. Like, you're never gonna hit that Hammer. So yeah, okay. Sanctification, obviously, just such a good spell, such a very, very good spell, and they use it really well this game. So Zero, this is where I was like, what the hell are they going to draft? What is this draft? And then they get kooky and they're like, well, we could do something about Hammer. At least we can try. And they pick something, and they pick Stitches. And I'm pretty sure that was all about the Hammer there. So what do you think of the Stitches pick?
I don't like it. You're relying. So if you watch a Stitches and Malfurion, this goes back old school, and it's kind of newish school again, is that the minute a hook goes out, you instantly throw roots down. Whether you know you're going to get somebody or not, you got to have trust. That way you have follow-up. If you're late with the roots by even a split second, you don't capture anybody. The same thing is that you have the root from Thrall, you have the tongue from Dahaka. The problem is you don't have big follow-up damage. Yes, if you can land the roots, then you can hit that hero. But you also have Cleanse. You have Tyrael that's going to be able to protect them. He has shields. Later he has Sanctification. And it's very difficult. And the old adage, and it's actually very difficult for Ballistics to do, but back in the day it was always like, if you get hit with a Stitches hook, the #1 counter is to just instantly dive on top of it. Like, They pull one person, you dive on them because their focus is on that one hero. And then you just bring the thunder with everybody in there. And you look at heroes like ETC, Brightwing, if she opts to go Blink Heal, Li Ming, Tyrael. They all have some type of mobility. Obviously, Hammers relies on her boost, but they all have some type of mobility in some sense of the way. That's why I said that a lot of heroes that you're going to see prioritized have wave clear, mobility, and CC. In some form or fashion, or they're going to be really good at 2 of those, or really, really good at 1 of those. And so that right there in itself they all have instant mobility, basically, outside of Eldrin. This takes a split second,
Right.
then the boost. So it's really difficult to follow up on that, especially when you don't have big burst damage. And Thrall doesn't necessarily fit it. Yes, he has good above average damage. Dahaka, you have to isolate a hero, you have to lock them down,
Right.
and then you have to burst them. And if they get cleansed or have mobility, it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
they made it happen at times, but
yeah,
it's very difficult to
They had
do.
a few, yeah. Other than Wind Fury, there's no burst damage at all. Even with Gorge, with the old vomit on the lawn technique, where he gorges and he throws up on the lawn like in college. You even with that, with Tyrael's like, I don't care if you do that. Like I'm coming, like here I come, like. And Li Ming's right behind her and power slides, and it didn't work. It was that's why I thought this draft was so cool in that Ballistics adapted their draft really well when the Tassadar got banned, and they had a backup plan and executed it. They had a second strength to their draft that they really emphasized, and it worked out really well for them. So yeah, that's why I picked that draft. But yeah, they did end up winning this game. Yeah, and there's more GCWC on tonight, I believe, and I will probably be checking out the VODs of that just because I like that tournament a lot and those teams. So yeah, overall, I ask this of everybody who comes on JHow, because we like to talk about pro drafts a lot, but I also want to talk about personal drafting. What if you could tell people one or two things about drafting in their own games to remember? What would be like your number one tip for drafting?
Pick whatever you want to pick.
Pick whatever you want to pick.
Oh.
I'm kidding.
I was like, that's the first time I heard that one. Okay.
Where's the top button? Cut him off. Come on.
I think the number one thing is, and it's really difficult to understand, like if you're playing Hero League, like, all right, what complements my team the best? It's always very difficult to figure out what counters what you're trying to do and what you're trying to do. The number one thing I think for me is if you're drafting and if you're in Hero League, the number one thing is at least type or hover what you want to pick, or speak up if you can't do one thing, right?
Communication.
But in terms of drafting, it's knowing your own team composition, understanding how you fit into the comp. When the draft is done, think, how do we win a team fight?
Right.
How do I stay alive in a lane? What can I bring value in a lane, and when do what can I bring to camps? And understanding individual heroes and their strengths and their weaknesses is the biggest thing. You have to understand where your strengths are and your strengths individually, as well as your strengths within your team composition. I used this example last night, is that you might be on a gray main, but your job as gray main is not to instantly dive into Worgen form. That's a really bad mentality. Your job as gray main is to poke, and then you find that hero that's at like 50 to 60% health, and then you dive in. And so understanding the strengths of your hero and how best to use them is the biggest thing. It's really hard because not everybody's always going to understand that, but understanding your own team composition outside of just your own hero is kind of important. Like if you're an all-in Illidan against the Brightwing, Muradin, Ariel, then just you're not playing it right, man. You got to know your team.
So I'd say yeah, that what basically sum up what you're saying is make your team work with your drafting before you worry about their countering their team. Because a lot of times I'll have someone be like, I'm picking this to counter this, and it just kind of wrecks our comp. Like they pick a weird specialist or something that's like really good against one of their heroes, but then it's like, hi, we don't have a healer though. Like, stuff like that. So make your team work before you worry about killing their team in the draft. So
if you think that, all right, we have 4 strong people, I'm last pick, and they have a couple of squishies on their backside, and I'm going to go Zeratul, and you don't have anything that's really going to do damage. You're not 100-0 in anybody as Zeratul in a team fight.
Right.
And you should think about not just laning phase or picking people off. You have to think in a true team fight, because when it all comes down to it, you're eventually going to find yourself in a team fight. And if you lose one later in the game, because that's when it's guaranteed to happen, then you're probably screwed.
Yeah, that's crucial for sure. Okay.
Well, I'm glad that that advice portion really time came around. I was worried you were going to say, first pick Nova, and that's how you win. So.
Well, that actually is most of the time.
Yeah. There we
yeah.
go.
I mean, most games. Yeah.
First pick Nova that says, "Don't worry, I got this."
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, they always
I have
always
the
reassure
Nexus
you.
game,
They
guys.
always.
Don't worry, I'm good.
There's no bigger death knell in HOTS than when the first pick Nova tells you, "Oh, I got like 85% win rate. Don't worry, boys. I got this." And you're like, "We already lost. We already lost." Yeah.
So they've only ever played 8.5 games. So.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, JHow, you've been an awesome guest. Your analysis, as always, is on point, thorough, baritone, and just very informative. So thank you so much for coming on, man.
I appreciate you guys having me on,
Thank
man.
you for showering for us, too.
Yes.
That's really
Yeah.
kind of... I feel honored.
Try and do it once a day sometimes.
Yeah, nice. Okay, well, yeah, guys, this was Nexus Drafthouse. You can follow JHow on Twitter if you don't already. If you're watching this, you probably do, but his Twitter is right there, JHow Gaming. What are you casting next, man? What are you up to in the near future?
I leave tomorrow to fly to Connecticut to go to Jake's place to do qualifiers this weekend.
Nice, yeah.
Awesome.
Okay,
So
yeah, that's
tomorrow
right. You
night,
went up
going
there.
back up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be cold again.
Yeah, you're gonna bring
I'm
more.
so
Bring
excited
more.
leaving from Florida.
Bring your mittens. Bring your little earmuffs. Cast with your earmuffs. Pull that.
The second day I was at his place, I wore a hoodie and a winter coat. Like I was that cold.
I believe it for sure.
Tell them to turn on the heat.
Oh man, that esports money goes to other things. Can't have heat.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
All right. So this is Storm Legacy. We're a fan site. You should check out the site. We have this show every week. Thank you so much to Blizzard for putting us on the launcher and bringing people in and tweeting us and all that. It's always an honor. It's just like humbling. It's like, yay, But yeah, we do this every week. We have reworked Monday Night Team League coming soon. Obviously, Team League is changing from 5 players to other things, so we're going to have to change some things about Monday Night Team League, but it's a show not every Monday, but it will be every Monday once we do it, about finding you a team and playing with us and just kind of just bringing people together in a warm, fuzzy ladder hug. So yeah, check it out. Follow us on Twitter at Storm Legacy Team. Ryan,
Sell that.
Ryan, thank you. Okay, that's why I make the big bucks down at the radio station. Okay. All right, guys. Good show. Thank you very much, and yeah, talk to you soon.